Anthonie Knapp might be one of the weirdest offensive tackle evaluations in next year's draft class because the tape keeps saying one thing and the measurements say something else. He was a tight end, an outside linebacker in high school before moving to offensive tackle. Signed with Notre Dame as a 3-star recruit, and then got thrown into the fire immediately when Charles Jagusah, I believe is his name, went down in fall camp. Knapp started at left tackle in the opener at Texas A&M, became the only the third true freshman offensive lineman in Notre Dame history to start week 1. Started 15 games, earned freshman All-American honors, came back in 2025, started 12 more games, cut his pressure numbers down, allowed just 1 sack, and helped anchor the Irish rushing attack that hit 329 yards against Syracuse and 306 yards against USC. But here's the problem. He's undersized. Short arms, below average timed athleticism, and almost every scout is asking if he is really a tackle or an interior offensive lineman. So today we're breaking down Anthonie Knapp, why he's offensive tackle number 8, why the Notre Dame take matters, and why his final NFL position is the entire evaluation. Before we get into it, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, do all the wonderful YouTube things as we keep putting in the work here on Draft Yoda. Currently sitting at an 8.65 out of 10. Anthonie Knapp is my offensive tackle number 8, number 83 overall prospect. And this is one of those evaluations where I completely understand both sides of the argument. On one side, Notre Dame keeps starting him at left tackle, and the results keep being good enough to make you pay attention. You know, started as a true freshman, protected through a championship game run, earned freshman All-American recognition, came back sophomore and improved, just allowed just 1 sack his sophomore season, and was part of a rushing attack that exploded late in the year. And his processing and consistency look older than his actual class, and that's great. That's good. But the other side is the measurements, and the measurements are hard to ignore. He's undersized for a tackle. He has shorter arms. His timed foot speed is modest. And when elite length attacks him, the margin gets tight and gets tight quick. So the question's simple. Is Knapp really a long-term tackle? Or is he one of those college left tackles that becomes a guard or a center in the NFL? Knapp came out of Roswell High School in Roswell, Georgia, and his football journey didn't start as a pure offensive tackle. He played tight end. He played outside linebacker. Then his coaching staff moved him to offensive tackle as a sophomore, and that transition changed everything for him because he moved to the offensive line. The development took off. He earned 3 straight first-team all-region selections, was named to the All-American Bowl, drew offers from Penn State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and other programs before he finally committed with Notre Dame as a 3-star recruit in 2024's class. And the background to me matters. Tight end and linebacker experience usually means that the player has some feel for movement, understands space, and some football instincts outside of just lining up and blocking. Not saying that lining up and blocking isn't hard. It is. It is very draining. It's very mentally tasking. But to have experience at other positions, you get to see it from a different angle, and it allows you to attack that job differently than others. Came in as a true freshman, and his career started fast. The projected starter went down, tore his pectoral muscle in fall camp, and suddenly Notre Dame needed an answer at left tackle. And left tackle is one of the most difficult positions on the field. Notre Dame did not have the luxury of slowly easing Knapp into the lineup. He stepped in for the opener against Texas A&M week 1. And by doing that, he became only the 3rd true freshman offensive lineman Notre Dame has had in their entire history to start week 1. That's a massive note. In the history of Notre Dame, in the history of their linemen, he is one of 3 offensive linemen that started week 1 as a true freshman. That's rare. You know, played all 15 games, earned, you know, earned freshman All-American honors in doing so. And it's a serious first-year profile. Most young offensive linemen still have to learn a playbook. Knapp started at left tackle while others were redshirting, and that matters because I've said it before and I'll say it a bunch of times when it comes to offensive linemen. Reps matter for offensive linemen. They're very valuable. The more reps you can get, the better, especially from a young age. And being able to start as a true freshman at Notre Dame with that level of expectation, I wish they had a tougher schedule, but that's something I wish from Notre Dame. That's nothing against Knapp. He played the players that were against him, and he saw some high level pass rushers. He saw some different fronts, and he had to learn to communicate as a freshman, had to survive pressure, had to handle real game plans, and had to grow with the public and the spotlight on him. There's no hiding when you're at left tackle. It's very obvious what you are. Freshman season ended with an ankle injury in the Orange Bowl against Penn State. And, that's a reminder of the workload he had. 15 starts as a true freshman offensive lineman. It's a lot of football. And by the end of the season, his body was tested. The injury did not erase the season, but it's part of the file because you've shown me that you had an ankle. You had an issue in that 15th game. And the NFL season's 17 games, regular season, going to 18, and then playoff football on top of that. So you got to be able to last. Sophomore season came back, though, started 12 games, took a clear step forward, and that's one of the more important parts. He didn't repeat the same mistakes. He improved. He cut his pressures down by roughly 2/3, gave up only 1 sack all year, and across the final 11 games, he allowed only 11 pressures. That's a strong response after some early struggles, and it tells you he learns. It tells you the game was starting to slow down for him, and it tells you he can process his mistakes and correct them. And for a young offensive lineman, that matters so much. I have seen and I've evaluated a lot of linemen that continually make the same mistake. And if you can show me that you can learn from that mistake and fix that mistake, especially at a young age as a sophomore, that's massive. And I don't want to understate the impact he had on the rushing attack in 2025. Helped anchor a 329-yard day against Syracuse, a 306-yard day against USC. Those are huge numbers. And that's what makes Knapp interesting, is he actually grades better as a run blocker than a protector. And that is unusual for his build. Usually when you see a lighter, undersized tackle, you expect the pass protection to be the selling point and the run game to be the worry. With Knapp, the run game feels like it's one of the more appealing parts of his profile. He understands angles. He understands plays and where to balance himself inside them. He can position defenders. He can fit the structure of a run game very well. And 2 years of starting left tackle for a playoff caliber program before his junior season matters. There are offensive linemen who enter the draft conversation with traits but limited tape. Knapp already has major experience on his side. Started as a true freshman, started as a sophomore, left tackle snaps, playoff caliber games, high pressure environments, and that's all valuable. His processing speed has helped him grow in that time. Knapp sees the game well. He recognizes movement. He understands timing. He plays with snap to snap consistency that does not always look like a young player. He has proven that he can identify rush plans, and he can understand when help is coming, and he knows how to absorb that pressure of the spotlight being on him, and his run blocking truly is it's truly unusual for his body type. At 296 pounds, most tackles you see at that size struggle in the run game. But the tape is better than what you would think. He plays with good timing. He understands angles. He can work with combinations, and he can help create movement by positioning rather than just pure mass. And that's valuable. You can add mass, but if you don't understand positioning, then the mass is just mass. That the November stretch is very important for him. The Navy game and the games after it showed some of the cleanest two-way football for him. It's exactly what you want to see from a young lineman. Better late than early, cleaner tape as the season goes on, more confidence, better technique, more consistent results. And Knapp's season had a rough start in his sophomore year, but he responded, and the response matters. He struggled, he adjusted, he improved, and that is a huge positive for me. I love being able to see a young lineman adapt and overcome those issues that get shown to him on tape or and during the plays on the field. Nobody's perfect. I've said it every time. Nobody's perfect. Knapp is listed at 296 pounds, and that is undersized for a tackle, especially for a left tackle at the NFL level. Edges are bigger, edges are longer, edges are more explosive. Power rushers will test the chest. Long rushers will test his arms. And if he can't add more functional mass, the margin stays very thin. It's probably the biggest reason scouts will talk about moving him inside is his size and his arm length. He has shorter arms. For the tackle spot. I don't want to say this is a major issue for the NFL projection because we've seen shorter arm tackles that are able to survive in the NFL, but most of them get moved inside. At tackle, length matters. It helps you land first, helps you keep rushers off your chest, helps you widen the arc, helps you recover. If you're a short-armed outside, everything has to be cleaner. You have to be better. Your timing has to be better. Your hands have to be more precise. Your anchor has to be stronger. Knapp can survive in college because the processing and technique are so good. But in the NFL, short arm tackles get tested immediately. And the question is, can he pass that test? The Miami opener is a warning label. It was, for lack of a better term, a protection meltdown that lasted a half. That matters because it showed what happens when NFL grade length attacks his margins. When rushers can get to him, stress him, and force him to recover with less than ideal tools, the whole thing gets uncomfortable. I don't want to define him by that half because he improved afterwards. He learned and developed counters and figured out things, but that half is going to be something that NFL coaches and NFL teams watch, especially with it being Miami and the level of talent you were playing. Another concern I have for him is the foot speed. He's got modest foot speed by a stopwatch. Then that narrows his technique just a little bit. If you're undersized and short-armed, elite foot quickness can save you. If you're undersized, short-armed, and only modest athletically, the technique has to be excellent. And that's the challenge. Knapp does a lot of things right, but the physical profile does not give him a massive cushion. He has to win early. He has to win with timing, and he has to avoid bad positions. Because if you lose leverage, he does not have the elite length or elite athletic recovery to erase the mistake. And the question's going to be, do you stay at tackle or do we follow the frame math and move you to guard or center? He's never taken a college snap at guard or center, but that's part of the entire evaluation. Scouts will project him inside because of his size. I believe you've shown enough that you're given the chance to play tackle, whether that's right tackle or left tackle. I think Knapp will be given a chance to play tackle in the NFL. We've seen enough shorter arm left tackles and right tackles that you can make it work on certain teams, and you don't automatically have to be kicked inside. But you have to be perfect with your technique. You have to have, a little bit more mass and a little bit more to you. But 2026 is important to Knapp. Notre Dame has two possible paths. They can keep proving that he's a left tackle, or they can start the interior conversation themselves. Either path has value for him. If he stays at left tackle and keeps improving, it strengthens the argument that the tape matters more than the measurements and that he can play tackle. And I believe he can. If he moves inside and looks natural at guard or center, the NFL projection gets a little bit cleaner. If he moves to guard and excels like I think he could, then that's a very easy evaluation next year. The checklist is pretty clear. Add functional strength, improve protection against length, keep the pressure numbers low, maintain the run game value, show a little more of your anchor, improve the Miami type meltdown is not a part of the weekly range anymore. If he does that, he's going to climb. Tackles and Notre Dame offensive linemen climb in draft classes because they know they've been coached well and they know they have dealt with the spotlight. Currently sitting at an 8.65 out of 10, prospect number 83, offensive tackle number 8. He's an experienced, intelligent, undersized left tackle with excellent early career starting experience, strong processing, good run game feel, and one of the most fascinating position projections in the offensive line group. He's already moved from tight end to tackle. He's already moved from outside linebacker to tackle. He's a little undersized at 296. He's got shorter arms for a tackle, and his foot speed is modest. But the tape you have to believe in the tape, and I do. But that's what I think about, Anthonie Knapp. What do you think about him? Is he an NFL tackle? Should he be moved to guard or center? How much should we trust 2 years of Notre Dame left tackle tape when the measurements point somewhere else? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and follow along as we keep doing these player evaluations. We're on our way to 100 before college football kicks off. As always, I am Draft Yoda, Bill Workman, your favorite draft nerd's favorite draft nerd, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.